My ex-husband showed up at my retirement party after 20 years. He misjudged me. The ballroom smelled like gardenias and warm bread. 200 people filled round tables draped in white linen, and the chandelier above cast small circles of gold across every surface like scattered coins. A banner stretched across the far wall in deep navy letters. 30 years of excellence. Thank you, Diane Halbrook. A slideshow played on the screen behind the podium. Photos I had almost forgotten. Me at 35, standing in front of a warehouse with a clipboard and a hard hat 2 sizes too big. Me at 42, shaking hands with a governor at a supply chain summit. Me at 50, leading a boardroom presentation with reading glasses perched on my nose and a confidence I didn't know I had at the time. The room was applauding. Not politely. Fully. The kind of applause that comes from people who mean it because they watched you earn it. I stood near the stage in a charcoal dress Lillian helped me choose. My hands were steady. My breathing was even. I had practiced this smile in the mirror that morning, but I didn't need the rehearsal. It came naturally. Then the ballroom doors opened, and everything I had buried for 20 years walked back in. He didn't enter the way he used to. No wide stride, no hand raised in greeting, no scan of the room to see who was watching him arrive. He slipped in. Quietly. Through the side of the double doors, the way someone enters a church service that has already started. Head slightly lowered. Jacket buttoned. One hand adjusting his cuff like a man checking his armor before stepping onto ground he hasn't earned the right to stand on. Victor. I recognized him before my brain finished processing the image. The way you recognize a song from the first 3 notes, even if you haven't heard it in decades. The shape of his shoulders. The angle of his jaw. The particular way he held his chin when he was unsure but didn't want anyone to know it. He was older. The hair that had been dark and full was now silver and thinned at the temples. His face was narrower. The cheekbones sharper. Not from fitness. From time doing what time does to men who once relied on their appearance and then watched it leave without asking permission. He stood just inside the doorway. And he looked at the room the way a man looks at a country he used to live in. He scanned the crowd. I watched his eyes move across the tables, the banner, the slideshow cycling through 3 decades of my career. His gaze paused on the screen. A photo of me receiving the Regional Logistics Award in 2014. Navy blazer. Firm handshake. A room full of executives standing behind me. His expression shifted. Not dramatically, just a flicker. The way a candle moves when a door opens somewhere in the house. A small disturbance in something he thought was settled. He looked at the banner again. My name in letters large enough to read from the back of the room. Then he looked at the crowd. 200 people. Standing, clapping, holding glasses raised in my direction. For 1 second. And I caught it because I had spent 20 years learning to read rooms the way other people read books. He looked unsure. Like a man who had followed directions to one address and arrived at another. Like he had expected something smaller. Something quieter. Something that matched the woman he remembered leaving behind, in a kitchen with a dish towel and a mortgage, and nothing ahead of her. But silence. He was about to find out how wrong he was. My name is Diane Halbrook. I am 65 years old. I have spent the last 30 years working in corporate operations for a logistics company that moves freight across 14 states. I started as a scheduling clerk in a windowless office with a phone that rang constantly and a chair with one broken wheel. I retired today as Senior Vice President of Operations. The title took 3 decades to earn and 1 evening to celebrate. 20 years ago, a man I had been married to for 15 years looked at me across our kitchen table and told me I had become predictable. He said it the way someone describes the weather. Not with malice. With boredom. Which is worse. He left me for a woman named Petra. She was 23, he was 48. The math was ugly, but the message was clear. I was the life he was finished with. She was the life he believed he deserved. He packed 2 suitcases. Took the good luggage, left the mismatched set with the broken zipper. He walked out believing he was the one moving forward. He never considered the possibility that I might move further. When Victor left, he didn't slam the door. I want people to understand that, because it matters. The way a person leaves tells you what they think of what they're leaving behind. A slammed door means anger. Anger means attachment. Attachment means some part of them is still tethered to what they're walking away from. Victor closed the door gently. The latch clicked with the soft precision of someone hanging up a phone after a conversation that no longer interested them. He loaded his suitcases into the trunk of his car, adjusted his mirror, pulled out of the driveway without looking back at the house. I stood at the kitchen window and watched. My hands were in dishwater, warm, soapy. The mundane machinery of a Tuesday evening continuing without permission. He turned left at the end of the street. The taillights disappeared behind the Henderson's oak tree. And that was it. 15 years of marriage dissolved into a left turn and a set of brake lights. I stood there for a long time. The dishwater went cold. The soap bubbles collapsed one by one on the surface, each small pop inaudible beneath the hum of the refrigerator. The house didn't feel empty yet. That would come later. Around midnight, when the silence introduced itself properly. He told me about Petra on a Sunday. We were in the living room. Football was on the television, muted. I was folding laundry on the couch. He was standing near the bookshelf, the one we bought together at an estate sale in '94, running his finger along the spines of books neither of us had opened in years. "I've met someone," he said. The way he said it, not nervous, not apologetic, just declarative, told me this wasn't a confession. It was an announcement. The decision had already been made. He wasn't asking for my reaction. He was delivering a verdict. "She makes me feel alive," he said. Alive. As if our marriage had been a kind of sedation. As if 15 years of building a home and sharing meals and sleeping beside each other had been the medical equivalent of anesthesia. I set down the shirt I was folding, one of his, blue cotton, second button loose. "How long?" I asked. 4 months. 4 months. 16 weeks of sitting across from me at dinner, with a secret folded behind his ribs like a letter he hadn't decided to mail yet. I picked the shirt back up and finished folding it. Some habits survive the moment they should die. He told me I had become predictable. He used that word specifically, not boring, not distant. Predictable. As if consistency were a flaw. As if the woman who worked 2 jobs and kept the house running and remembered every appointment and paid every bill on time was somehow deficient, because she could be relied upon. "You know exactly what tomorrow looks like," he said. And the day after that. And the one after that. I was working as a scheduling clerk at Bridger Logistics during the day and waitressing 3 evenings a week at a restaurant near the highway. I did both because his freelance consulting income was unpredictable and the mortgage didn't care about creativity. Predictable. The word meant I was steady. It meant I showed up. It meant I held the floor while he stood on it. But he didn't see it that way. He saw a woman who stopped surprising him. A woman who wore the same 3 pairs of shoes. A woman who fell asleep on the couch at 9:30 because she had been awake since 5. He wanted surprise. He wanted electricity. He wanted the feeling of standing at the edge of something new. He found it in a 23-year-old. I found it somewhere else entirely. But that part came later. The day he left, I stood in the kitchen for an hour after his car disappeared. Not crying, not yet, just standing, holding a dish towel in one hand and a silence in the other that was heavier than anything I had ever carried. The mortgage had 17 years left on it. The checking account held enough for 2 months of bills if I didn't eat. His name was still on the utilities. The car in the driveway was mine, but the insurance was under his policy. He left for someone who made him feel alive. He left me holding the architecture of everything he wanted to feel free from. I looked around the kitchen. The calendar on the wall, with dentist appointments and oil changes written in my handwriting. The grocery list on the fridge, half crossed off. The light above the stove that buzzed when it was humid. This was the life he called predictable. I sat down at the table, placed the dish towel in front of me, pressed my palms flat against the wood. I didn't know yet what I was going to build. I didn't know the night classes or the promotions or the ballroom with my name on a banner. I just knew he had misjudged me. And I intended eventually to prove it to myself. The first year alone was not what people imagine. It wasn't dramatic. There was no montage, no moment of standing in the rain and deciding to change. It was quiet, methodical. The way a house settles after someone moves out. Slowly, in small shifts, a creak in the floorboards, a door that swings differently without the weight of a second body moving through the rooms. I kept working both jobs. I ate dinner standing at the counter because sitting at the table alone made the empty chair across from me louder than any sound in the house. I paid the mortgage on time. Every month. I refinanced in March and got his name removed from every document. The bank officer asked if there was a reason for the change. I said, "He doesn't live here anymore." She nodded and didn't ask anything else. I learned something that year. Silence is not the same as loneliness. Silence is the absence of noise. Loneliness is the absence of meaning. My house was silent. But the work I did every day, the shifts, the bills, the small victories of keeping everything upright, had meaning. And meaning, it turns out, is enough to keep a person moving. The idea came from a flyer pinned to the break room bulletin board at Bridger Logistics. White paper. Black ink. A community college offering evening courses in logistics management and supply chain operations. I pulled the flyer off the board during my lunch break, folded it into my pocket, forgot about it for 3 days, found it again while doing laundry, crumpled but legible. I enrolled the following week. The classroom was small. Fluorescent lights that hummed. Desks with attached chairs designed for people half my size. The instructor was a man named Dr. Pham who spoke quickly and expected you to keep up. I sat beside students who were 22 and 25 and 28. They typed on laptops. I took notes by hand in a spiral notebook with a blue pen. My handwriting was neater than theirs. My attention span was longer. My motivation was different. They were building careers. I was rebuilding a life. The first exam came back with a 91 written in red at the top. I held the paper in my car afterward and stared at the number until the parking lot emptied. 91. The woman Victor called predictable had just outscored a room full of people with their whole lives ahead of them. While I studied supply chain models and inventory optimization, Victor was in Florida. I know because people tell you things whether you want to hear them or not. Mutual friends. A cousin who saw his posts online. The small, well-meaning cruelties of being kept informed about someone who left you. He and Petra were living in a rented condo near the coast. There were photos, beach sunsets, restaurant patios. Her arm draped around his neck, with the easy confidence of a woman who hadn't yet realized that the man she was holding had a habit of leaving. He looked happy. Or at least he looked like the version of happy that photographs well. Tan, relaxed, smiling with teeth that had been whitened since I last saw them. I closed the screen every time someone showed me. Not from jealousy. From discipline. His life was no longer data I needed to process. It was noise. And noise, I was learning, was the enemy of focus. I focused instead on case studies, on freight routing algorithms, on the way a well-designed supply chain moved goods across a continent with the precision of a nervous system. He was posting sunset photos. I was learning how to move the world. The world didn't know the difference yet. But it would. The promotions came slowly at first, the way anything real comes, not in a burst, in a current. Steady and quiet and easy to miss if you weren't paying attention. After I finished the night courses, I applied for a coordinator role at Bridger. It was one step above clerk, same building, different floor, a desk with a window that looked out over the loading dock instead of a wall. I got it. Not because anyone owed me anything, because I had the scores, the knowledge, and the willingness to take on projects nobody else wanted. Friday evening inventory reconciliations, holiday weekend shipment coverage, the thankless tasks that keep a company running while everyone else is at home. 2 years later, I moved to operations analyst. 2 years after that, regional logistics lead. Each title came with a new office, a slightly better view, and the quiet acknowledgement from people above me that I wasn't going anywhere except up. I didn't announce these things, I didn't post about them. I didn't call Victor to make sure he knew. The work spoke for itself. And the work was loud enough. By year 10, I was running a department of 47 people. By year 15, I was the one they called when things went wrong. The department I built didn't exist before I proposed it. That's the part I'm proudest of. Not the title, not the corner office. The fact that I stood in a boardroom at 53 years old and pitched an idea that every executive in the room initially dismissed. Integrated operations. a division that connected supply chain, warehousing, and last-mile delivery under a single oversight structure. It sounds obvious now. Back then, it was radical. Each department operated independently, which meant inefficiencies multiplied at every handoff. I spent 4 months building the proposal. Nights, weekends. A binder 3 inches thick with data, projections, and case studies from companies twice our size. The board said no the first time. I revised and came back. They said maybe. I revised again. They said yes. Within 2 years, the division had reduced transit delays by 31% and saved the company $11 million annually. My name was on the report that went to shareholders. Predictable, that's what he called me. The woman who showed up on time and paid the bills and folded his shirts. Predictable became profitable. Predictable became essential. Predictable became the reason 200 people were standing in a ballroom tonight, raising glasses with my name on the banner. Victor never attended a single one of my milestones. He was about to witness the last. Ethan Ward stood at the podium, 61, silver tie, the kind of CEO who remembers your name 3 years after you first meet him. He had run the company for the last 9 years, and in that time, he had never once made me feel like I was anything less than indispensable. He tapped his crystal glass with a pen. The room settled. Conversations folded into silence like napkins being placed on laps. I'm going to keep this short, he said, because Diane would want it that way. A ripple of laughter. He was right. I hated long speeches. He knew that from the 7 years we had spent in the same leadership meetings, where I routinely cut presentations in half and dared anyone to tell me what was missing. We wouldn't be where we are without Diane Halbrook, he said. And I don't mean that the way people usually mean it at events like this. I mean it literally. The division she built from nothing generates more annual revenue than any other arm of this company. Applause. One. Full. The kind that presses against your chest and makes your eyes sting if you let it. I let it. From across the room, standing near the back wall beside the open door, Victor watched. He did not clap. He stood very still. The slideshow cycled behind Ethan. Photos I had submitted reluctantly because Lillian insisted the evening needed visual storytelling, which was her polite way of saying I was too modest to celebrate myself without being ambushed. There I was at the governor's luncheon. Shaking hands, smiling without trying. A room full of men in expensive suits and me in the middle of it, not because someone invited me as a guest, but because I had earned the seat. There I was at the National Logistics Conference in Chicago, standing at a lectern, slides behind me, 300 people in the audience. I remembered that day. My voice shook for the first 12 seconds and then steadied when I realized the room was listening because the content was worth hearing. And there was the photo from last year. The company's 30th anniversary gala. Me and Lillian at a round table, laughing. Genuinely laughing. The kind that wrinkles your nose and makes you forget anyone might be watching. I glanced toward the back of the room. Victor was looking at the screen. His eyes moved from photo to photo with the slow, careful tracking of a man recalculating something he had gotten wrong a long time ago. He had never seen any of these moments. He had chosen not to be there for any of them. Now he was seeing all of them at once. Ethan finished his speech. The room rose, not because they were told to, because the evening had earned it. 200 people standing with glasses raised, and for a moment the ballroom sounded like the inside of something beautiful. Lillian appeared beside me. She always did that, materialized at the exact moment I needed someone solid. She had been my colleague for 22 years, and my closest friend for at least 18 of them. She was the one who drove me home the night of my divorce filing. She was the one who proofread my first board proposal at midnight and told me to cut pages 6 through 9 because they were trying too hard. She squeezed my hand. "You're radiant," she whispered, not loudly, just for me. I looked at her. Her eyes were damp. Not from sadness, from the particular emotion that comes when you watch someone you love receive what they deserve after watching them work for it in silence for years. I squeezed her hand back. "Thank you for staying," I said. She knew I didn't mean tonight. She knew I meant every late evening and every early morning and every moment in between when the work was invisible and the audience was empty. She stayed. That mattered more than any ballroom. Then Victor moved. I saw it from the corner of my eye. A shift in the crowd near the back. A figure detaching from the wall and moving forward through the spaces between tables. Not fast. Not slow. The deliberate, measured pace of a man who knows he doesn't belong but has decided to approach anyway. People stepped aside. Not because they recognized him. Because his posture announced that he was going somewhere specific and preferred not to be delayed. Lillian saw him next. Her grip on my hand tightened. Just slightly. The pressure of someone whose body recognizes a threat before their mind finishes naming it. "Is that?" she started. "Yes," I said. She looked at me. Searching for a signal. An instruction. A request to intervene. I gave her none. I straightened my shoulders, took a breath that filled my lungs completely, held it for 1 second, released it without sound. He was 20 feet away, then 10, then close enough that I could smell his cologne. Different from the one he wore during our marriage. Something sharper. More expensive. The scent of a man who had been reinventing himself and running out of versions. He stopped in front of me. And for the first time in 20 years, we were face to face. "Diane," he said. My name in his voice sounded like a word being pulled from a drawer that hadn't been opened in years. Dusty. Familiar. Slightly wrong, the way familiar things become wrong when too much time has passed between uses. He said it softly. Not with confidence. Not with the smooth delivery I remembered from a man who used to command dinner tables and client meetings in every room he entered. This was quieter, thinner, the voice of someone standing on ground they're no longer sure will hold them. "Victor," I said. Nothing else. Just his name. Returned the way you return a handshake. Firm, brief, without extra pressure. He looked at me, his eyes moved across my face with the careful attention of someone studying a painting they thought they remembered but now realized they never actually understood. "You look." He paused, searching for the word. His mouth moved slightly, cycling through options. "Different," he finished. The word was safe, neutral, a placeholder for something he couldn't bring himself to say. "I am different," I said, and I watched that sentence land on his face like a stone dropped into water. He hadn't expected me to agree so quickly. That was his first mistake of the evening. We stood in the space between two tables. The party continued around us. Glasses clinked. Music played from a string quartet Ethan had hired because he knew I hated DJs. Conversations folded and unfolded at every table like napkins being passed. Nobody noticed us, or if they did, they didn't recognize him. Why would they? He was a man from a chapter of my life that predated every person in this room except Lillian. He adjusted his jacket, the reflex of a man buying time. "Florida didn't work out," he said, 4 words. Delivered the way someone mentions a restaurant that closed. Casually, without detail, without inviting follow-up. But the absence of detail was itself a detail. "Things changed," he added. Things. Not we changed. Not I made a mistake. Not Petra and I ended. Just things. The vaguest noun in the English language, deployed like a curtain pulled across a window to keep someone from looking inside. I didn't ask. I didn't lean forward or tilt my head or offer the sympathetic silence that invites confession. I simply stood there, hands at my sides, and let the sentence sit between us without helping it. He waited for me to rescue the conversation. I didn't. He wasn't my responsibility anymore. He looked around the room. At the banner. At the slideshow still cycling behind the podium. At the people moving between tables, stopping to shake hands or laugh or refill their glasses. At the sheer, undeniable evidence that the woman he had left in a kitchen with a dish towel had built something that filled a ballroom. "I didn't know you'd become all this," he said. He gestured when he said it. A small wave of his hand that encompassed the room, the banner, the screen, and maybe something larger. Maybe the full scope of his miscalculation, spreading out in every direction. There it was. The sentence I hadn't known I was waiting to hear. Not because I needed his recognition. I had stopped needing that somewhere around year 5, in a classroom with fluorescent lights and a 91 written in red at the top of an exam. But because the sentence confirmed something I had always suspected. He hadn't left me because I was small. He left me because he couldn't see the size of what I was becoming. And a man who can't see potential doesn't leave because of what's missing. He leaves because of what he's unable to recognize. "I didn't become this," I said. I built it. The distinction mattered. Becoming is passive. Building is a choice made every day for 20 years. He shifted his weight, left foot to right. The movement of a man searching for solid ground in a conversation that keeps tilting away from him. You thought I stopped growing when you left, I said. It wasn't an accusation. It was an observation. Delivered the way I delivered findings in boardrooms, clearly. Without decoration, without raising my voice, because volume is for people who aren't sure their content is strong enough to stand on its own. He didn't deny it. That surprised me. I expected deflection. The trademark Victor pivot. The charming redirect that used to work at dinner parties and contract negotiations and every social setting where appearance mattered more than accuracy. But he didn't pivot. He just looked at me. His eyes were tired. Not the kind of tired that comes from one bad night. The kind that accumulates over years, layer by layer, like sediment at the bottom of something still. I thought a lot of things, he said. It was the closest thing to honesty I had heard from him in 2 decades. Not an apology, not a confession. Just an admission that his calculations had been based on incomplete data. I let the sentence stand. Some truths don't need a response, they just need a witness. Lillian approached. Not to interrupt, to check. She stood 3 feet away with a glass of champagne in each hand, one of which she extended toward me without a word. I took it. Our fingers brushed. A small exchange that carried 22 years of shorthand. The glass meant, I'm here. The touch meant, you're doing fine. Victor noticed her. He straightened slightly. The automatic posture correction of a man who recognizes he's being observed by someone who doesn't like him. Victor, this is Lillian Price, I said. My colleague and my closest friend. Lillian extended her free hand. Her grip was firm, brief, the kind of handshake that communicates everything necessary in 2 seconds. I've heard about you, she said. She didn't say it warmly. She didn't say it coldly. She said it the way a scientist names a specimen. With identification, not affection. Victor nodded. Good things, I hope. Lillian smiled. Not the kind that reaches the eyes, the kind that politely declines to answer. She looked at me. I looked at her. A full conversation passed between us in the time it took for Victor to clear his throat. Then Lillian said, They're about to bring out the cake. She walked away without looking at him again. He was not the interesting person in this room. We stood alone again. The string quartet played something slow and deliberate. A melody that moved in circles, like someone pacing in a room they couldn't leave. Victor looked at the people around us, not at their faces, at the way they moved. The ease, the familiarity, the way they touched my shoulder as they passed, or nodded from across the room, or raised a glass in my direction from a distance. He wasn't looking at wealth. I want to be specific about that. The room wasn't lavish. The company was generous but not extravagant. No ice sculptures, no champagne towers. Just good food, warm lighting, and 200 people who showed up because they wanted to, not because they had to. He was looking at permanence. The kind of permanence that comes from being in one place long enough, and working hard enough, and showing up consistently enough, that the place reshapes itself around you. He had spent 20 years chasing the opposite. Movement, novelty, the next thing and the next thing and the next. And here I was, standing in the center of a room that bore my name, surrounded by people who knew my story, rooted in the kind of life that only forms when you stop running and start building. He saw it, all of it, 20 years too late. You were never predictable, he said. The word arrived like a package returned to sender, stamped, addressed, and sent back to the person who mailed it 2 decades ago. It landed between us on the ballroom floor, and neither of us reached for it. He paused. His jaw worked, slightly, the way it used to when he was choosing his words carefully. When the charm wasn't enough and something more honest was required. You were stable, he said. Stable. I let the word settle. It was closer to the truth than anything he had said in 20 years. Not a compliment exactly. A correction. The kind a man makes when he finally realizes the thing he discarded was the thing he needed most. Stable. The woman who paid the mortgage, who worked 2 jobs, who studied at night and earned promotions during the day, who held the ground while he danced on top of it. Stable was not boring. Stable was the reason the house didn't fall down when he walked out. Stable was the reason I was standing in this ballroom instead of still sitting at that kitchen table, holding a dish towel and wondering where I went wrong. Yes, I said. I was. The difference between those two words, predictable and stable, had taken him 20 years to understand. It landed too late, but it landed. The band began playing something warm, a song I didn't recognize but liked immediately, the kind of melody that doesn't demand your attention. It just opens a door and lets you walk through if you want to. I looked at Victor one last time. He stood in his pressed jacket with his silver hair and his tired eyes and his hands that no longer reached for anything with the certainty they once had. He looked like a man standing at the edge of a room that wasn't his, watching a life he could have been part of if he had known what he was looking at when he had the chance. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't ask for another conversation. He didn't ask for anything at all. And that told me he understood, finally, that there was nothing left to ask for. "Good night, Victor," I said. I turned and walked back toward the tables where Lillian was waiting with cake and a glass of champagne and the easy laughter of a woman who had been there for every chapter he missed. He left for someone younger. I became someone stronger. He chased the next thing. I built the lasting thing. And when the music swelled and the room pulled me back into the warmth of the people who stayed, I didn't look over my shoulder. I never stopped walking.